Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made it to episode 672, and you got your host, DanK, better known as Dan Cougar, and I'm here with some more stories I picked up here and there, and of course, got cannabis oriented. This one I was really excited about. This comes from the healthguide.com, or excuse me, UR Health Code, healthguide.com, written by Dr. John Regan, February 12th. 2018. First of its kind study finds virtually no driving impairment under the influence of marijuana. As cannabis prohibition I'm stumbling again, laws crumble seemingly by the day, it's allowing more research to be performed on this psychoactive substance that has been a part of the human experience. The first study to analyze the effects of cannabis on driving performance found that it caused almost no impairment. The impairment that it did cause was similar to the observed under the influence of a legal alcohol limit. Researchers at the University of Iowa's National Advanced Driving Simulator carried out the study, sponsored by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, National Institute of Drug Abuse, and the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Once in a simulator, a 1996 Malibu sedan mounted in a 24-foot diameter dome, the drivers were assessed on weaving within the lane, how often the car left the lane, and the speed of the weaving. The drivers with only alcohol in their systems showed impairment in all three areas, while those strictly under the influence of vaporized cannabis only demonstrated problems weaving within the lane. Drivers with blood concentrations of 13.1 UGL/L THC or delta-9 THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, showed increased weaving that was similar to those with a 0.08 breath alcohol concentration, the legal limit in most states. The legal limit for THC in Washington and Colorado is 5 UGLs, the same amount other states have considered. As expected, there was impairment in all areas when alcohol and cannabis were mixed, but cannabis itself, when taken in moderate amounts, seemed to cause no significant impairment. In fact, some argue that it makes them drive safer or slower. The study's findings further illuminate the fact that alcohol is a much more dangerous drug than cannabis, and somehow the former is legal while the latter is not. With cannabis being decriminalized across the country, law enforcement will be getting their rules and regulations in place for the driving masses. They should be based on science and not on reefer madness mentalities. Another important finding should deter any attempts to deploy instant roadside tests for THC blood levels. The study also found that analyzing a driver's oral fluids can detect recent use of marijuana, but is not a reliable measurement of impairment. Everyone wants a breathalyzer, which works for alcohol because alcohol is metabolized in the lungs, says Andrew Spurgeon, a postdoctoral research fellow with the UI College of Pharmacy. He says, but for cannabis, this isn't as simple due to THC's metabolic and chemical properties. So that's something I've been hearing, that they can't really use a breathalyzer type of thing, and yet we hear stories occasionally that somebody's developing one. So we hear it back and forth. But anyway, this is pretty positive sounding report, and it's sounded interesting. I felt for years that the cannabis impairment was simply not an issue. We've all been saying that for years, and I think it was England, if I remember correctly, years ago did a test and found out the same thing. I've always said that suspended drivers actually make are pretty good drivers, because they're suspended and they don't have any insurance, so they can't afford to get pulled over. So they're driving more cautious than the rest of us. But I don't know. Of course, I don't recommend that. But anyway, so there you have it. And so it's interesting. We got good news that comes out like that. And here on the VA, on the veterans issues, the VA admits it can look at marijuana as an option for treating veterans. This is by Tom Angel. It was on the marijuanamoment.net, which is an interesting website, and I recommend it highly. That's marijuanamoment.net. They've got great stories, and it's on February 19th that they published this one. Despite repeated claims to the contrary, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is now admitting that it can look at marijuana as an option for treating veterans. The stance, which comes in the form of new content uploaded to a VA web page last week, contrasts with a letter that Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin sent to members of Congress in December, less than 2 months ago. Federal law restricts the VA's ability to conduct research involving medical marijuana or to refer veterans to such projects, he claimed at the time. There have been no changes to federal cannabis laws in the interim. The VA Office of Research and Development webpage at post-traumatic stress disorder now says that earlier research on medical cannabis found limited evidence that marijuana use might alleviate neuropathic pain in some patients, and that it might reduce spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis, but found insufficient evidence to assess the effects of marijuana on PTSD. VA is not currently able to prescribe medical marijuana to veterans, it continues, but can look at marijuana as an option for treating veterans. A catched previous version of the same page doesn't mention marijuana at all. The update to the web page comes as Shulkin and the department are under increasing pressure on medical cannabis and completely unrelated issues. A group of members of Congress are pushing the VA to allow its physicians to recommend medical cannabis, or at least to refer veterans to studies on the drug potential. And the VA Inspector General's report released last week found that Shulkin made serious derelictions that resulted in improper use of taxpayer money to cover portions of an overseas trip he and his wife took to Denmark and the UK last year. The report, which included portions of Shulkin's travel agenda, happened to reveal that on July 19th he met with British officials to discuss medical cannabis as part of the trip. Under an internal VA administration directive, the VA's policy is that its providers are prohibited from recommending, taking referrals to, or completing paperwork for veteran participation in state marijuana programs. Shulkin has repeatedly tried to pass the buck to Congress when asked about the issue. During a White House briefing last year, for example, he said that state medical cannabis laws may be providing some evidence that this is beginning to be helpful, and we're interested in looking at that and learning from that. But he added that until the federal law changes, we are not able to prescribe medical marijuana for conditions that may be helpful. The distinction between recommendation and prescription is an important one. No physician in the United States, government or private, can prescribe marijuana, because prescription is a federally regulated process, and cannabis currently falls under the Controlled Substances Act restrictive Schedule I category, that is supposed to be reserved for drugs with high potential for abuse and of no medical value. That's why the 29 states with medical cannabis access allow doctors to simply recommend the drug, circumventing the prescription process. Shulkin has the unilateral authority to rescind the internal ban and clear the way for VA doctors to recommend medical cannabis to veterans in states where it is illegal. But he has repeatedly claimed that federal law, without citing a particular statute, blocks him from doing so. The Secretary's unwillingness to move on it goes beyond just letting doctors who work for him recommend it. He has also thus far refused to help lift institutional roadblocks preventing the department from participating in scientific research on cannabis uses. In the interview last year, he said that it is not written within our legal scope to study that in formal research programs. That position has led to recruitment issues for researchers and conducting trials. For example, one such study on marijuana effects on PTSD has been prevented from reaching veterans at the Phoenix, Arizona VA website. This study needs 50 more participants, and the Phoenix VA is the best possible position to assist by simply allowing principal investigators to brief VA medical staff on the process of the study and by allowing clinic workers to review the existence of the study to potential participants. The American Legion, which represents more than 2.4 million military veterans, wrote to Shulkin in September, "Your immediate attention to this important matter is greatly appreciated. We ask for your direct involvement to ensure this critical research is fully enabled." And John Hudak, a researcher with the Brookings Institute, said that despite Shulkin's claims, doctors and researchers at the VA or in VA hospitals could conduct research into the medical efficiency of marijuana while remaining completely compliant with federal laws, regulations, and the United States obligations under international agreements. In December, the VA issued an updated policy offering physicians greater encouragement to discuss cannabis with their patients. The new directive urges government doctors to discuss with the veteran marijuana use due to its clinical relevance to patient care, and discuss marijuana use any veterans requesting information about requesting information about marijuana. But it maintains a long-standing department ban on physical recommendation. The new website language, however, and the revelation that Shulkin discussed the issue on his overseas trip shows that the VA's opposition to cannabis is not necessarily set in stone, at least when it comes to research, though the implications aren't immediately clear. No other arguments have worked in the past, so this may be a breakthrough. Sue Sisley, the researcher running the Arizona PTSD trial, told Marijuana Moment in an interview, referring to the webpage update. VA can definitely be more helpful if they wanted to. There is nothing blocking them. So that gives us some hope, and my veteran friends, I keep encouraging them, and things are getting better. We're not quite there yet, but we are definitely getting better, and things are moving along. So support cannabis use anywhere you can. Support cannabis users wherever you can, because it's simply a freedom issue. In a lot of cases, it's the person's health. So it is a medicine, whether you personally believe it or not. It is, and so that's just the way it is. So they say God made marijuana and man made beer. Which one do you trust? So anyway, we're going to be back for the second half, and we got a few more stories for you. So I'll be here, and hope you will too. Welcome to the second half of the episode 672, the Eugene Cannabis TV show. You got your host DanK, and reading some of the latest stories on cannabis and things that are really popping. This one is written by a local friend of ours, and it was in the Freedom Leaf magazine, the ones that I've had here on the show before and talked about. This is written by Doug McVeigh, dated February 20th this year. And we were talking about oversupply in the state of Oregon. Well, this is right in that same vein. He writes, contrary to report in Marijuana Business Daily on January 31st, marijuana in Oregon's legal market is not wholesaling as low as $50 a pound. Prices have fallen dramatically over the past few years, but not that far yet. The only Oregon weed selling for $50 a pound is leaf that processors buy to convert into oil. The Marijuana Biz Daily article was corrected shortly after to reflect this, but by then the $50 a pound story had legs of its own. There has been a dramatic drop in pot prices in Oregon since the state began legal sales in 2014. The decline is not surprising. In fact, it was inevitable. Prohibition artificially inflates the price of anything. Because of the risk involved and the many hands it touches before reaching the consumer. Legalization reduces risk, so prices naturally decrease at all levels. But there's more to the story than that. In Oregon, in the late 80s and early 90s, thanks to cheap electricity and low rents, the wholesale in-state price of high-grade indoor bud was between $2,000 and $2,400 a pound. Outdoors was a little less expensive. After Oregon's medical marijuana law was passed in 1998, prices declined gradually. By 2010, top shelf bud wholesaled for $1,600 to $2,000 a pound. Leaf ranged anywhere from free to $10 an ounce at retail. Medical marijuana dispensaries were finally legalized by the Oregon legislature in 2013. With regulations going into full effect the following year, when the state's voters legalized adult use, that's when prices started to seriously slide. 4 years later, according to a report issued by the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis, the wholesale price of marijuana flowers in the Beaver State is just over $2 a gram. That works out to around $900 a pound. Pot shops in Portland currently pay anywhere from $300 to $1,200 a pound for bud, so the state's report's estimate sounds accurate. Industry people expect wholesale prices to continue to drop. They also believe that by next year there will be fewer people in the business. Some in the industry argue that the price for those price declines is overproduction, and they have a point. The state makes money on each application it receives and each license it issues, so Oregon has an incentive to expand the number of businesses, regardless of whether they'll ever make any money. After auditing the state's recreational marijuana program, Secretary of State Dennis Richardson reported on February 7th, in 2015, Oregon Liquor Control Commission estimated that there would be initially 800 to 1,300 marijuana license applicants based on analysis of Washington and Colorado trends. Instead, by December 2017, the LCC had received 3,100 license applications and had approved over 1,600. Of those, over 50% are for producer licenses to grow marijuana, and 31% are for retail licenses to sell marijuana products. The number of approved applications is expected to reach approximately 2,000 by 2019. In Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, the analysis adds the number of recreational marijuana retailers is about the same, or just over 500. However, once you adjust the numbers based on population, it's clear that Oregon has significantly more stores. This does not necessarily mean Oregon is overstored. It may be, but it may also be the case that the other states are understored. Zoning laws and other restrictions in the cities and counties in Oregon that allow marijuana businesses, such as the law requiring them to be at least 1,000 feet away from other cannabis enterprises or school property, have the effect of forcing shops to be located relatively near one another. That can give people the illusion that there are a lot of retail stores, though in fact larger areas of the state are underserved. As with other consumer goods, price is a big factor in determining where people shop. Businesses offer specials and discounts and have to keep margins tight to draw repeat customers. It's great for consumers, but for businesses and their investors, it's a nightmare. The price pressure on the retailers is passed along to the growers and the processors, forcing their prices lower and lower. In January, Oregon's U.S. Attorney Billy J. Williams declared in an op-ed article in the Oregonian, the state's largest newspaper, that Oregon has a massive overproduction problem. He also claimed that legalization has resulted in large quantities of marijuana leaving the state. Oregon has been an exporter of marijuana for decades. How much is actually being diverted to non-legal states and whether it's been increasing is hard to say. Williams claimed that federal postal inspectors seized 2,644 pounds of pot leaving Oregon in 2017. He compared that with 984 pounds seized by inspectors in Colorado from 2013 to 2016 to try to show that Oregon was lax. That was misleading. The federal Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Traffic Area Report submitted last October concluded that seizures of Colorado cannabis by postal inspectors have increased every year since it was legalized in 2012, with 1,725 pounds seized in 2016. The industry claims that illegal growers are to blame. After all, legal growers have a legal market, but prices on the legal market are falling fast. Businesses that are losing their shirts still have to satisfy investors, so they've got a motive to sell pot outside the system. That's supposed to be impossible because the legal market is regulated and there's oversight, isn't it? Well, the truth about seed-to-sale tracking systems. The short answer is no. Secretary Richardson's audit identified 5 issues that increase the risk that OLCC may not deduct potential compliance violations or illegal activity. These include relying on self-reported data from marijuana businesses, inconsistent weight measurement systems, allowing untracked marijuana inventory within the first 90 days of operations, poor or insufficient data quality in the cannabis tracking system, and an insufficient number of trained inspectors needed for on-site investigations. All states with legal marijuana sales are reported and tracking requirements, so-called seed-to-sale systems, but they all have the same basic flaw. They rely on the honesty of businesses. In Oregon, growers are required to use RFID chips. Washington allows barcodes. The chip tracks the physical plant or the physical plant bags of weed via GPS. But those chips don't actually attach themselves to each flower, weigh the usable pot, or track what happens to the plant or the dried marijuana. Tracking is so difficult that Colorado lawmakers have introduced a bill that would fund research at the University of Colorado to develop a tracking agent, such as a spray that could be applied directly to marijuana plants. This spray would have to stay on for months as the plant grows, is watered, gets chopped down, dried, trimmed, bagged, and sold, and do more than just let regulators check the plant by GPS. As long as it keeps the feds out, this may be worth looking into. The neo-prohibitionists now want to spend more and more of the tax revenue Oregon is collecting from marijuana sales, going after the mostly poor people that they have excluded from the market by overregulation. Longtime Oregon activist John Sajo tells Freedom Leaf, the solution to Oregon and California having an oversupply of cannabis is to deschedule cannabis federally. Let the states create more inclusive systems and let the free market sort it out. Spending millions of dollars investing, arresting, prosecuting, and incarcerating people for marijuana will cause pain and suffering, but it will never end the black market for as long as there are desperate people who have been left behind. So, yeah, that was a great read by Doug McVeigh. Know Doug personally, and made some great points. And I'll be talking about oversupply in the future. Another quick thing I want to cover, and this is kind of along the same lines. I picked this up off of Facebook, so I don't know who the person is, but still wanted to put it out there. And this was on the 13th of February. When I read this, it made me think, I asked the question, are the vultures starting to circle, or is this just capitalism at work, or both? He writes, I posted a while back about the turn in the market from people wanting to move here to start farms to the shift in people wanting to sell their farm due to the downturn in the market conditions, giving the overabundance of product being grown here and throughout the rest of the state. I have had quite a few people contact me recently looking for turnkey farms. There are quite a few for sale, but most are overpriced. The owners overbuilt or placed too much value on the blue sky of what could be produced. The buyers I am looking for are successful by running a lean operation with sound business practice. If you are considering selling your farm and you would like out of it and make sense, send me a message. I will arrange to come and tour your property with you and see if it's fit for any of my buyers. So anyway, there you go. So I guess there's people looking. It's just supply and demand, you know. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I should have mentioned earlier, but this is big news. Our friend Danbo, I just got the word, is our friend Danbo is out of prison and he is free. I don't know the details, whether he's on, questions come up. It was on probation. Actually, when I think about it, I can't remember, but I don't think so. It seems to me when you get out of federal, I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll find out. But anyway, the big news is our friend Danbo has been on the show many times. Danbo is in part the reason I'm here today. I started out helping on the camera, run the camera on Cannabis TV, and Danbo said, you ought to go on camera. And I said, well, I'd like to, but I can't because my wife is a daycare provider. And so I wore it. Anyway, he says, wear a bag over your head. So it was Danbo's idea for all those years that I wore a bag over my head so I could do the show. So anyway, we hope to have him on the show as soon as possible. We're sure going to have a party. We'll be telling you about it. So see you next week.